The metallic crash echoed through the Riverside Community Center like a gunshot, reverberating off the pristine walls and polished floors. 13-year-old Leo Martinez felt the cold metal of the vending machine bite into his back as his shoulder slammed against the glass front, causing the rows of candy bars and chips to rattle like dice in a cup. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. And, for a moment, the world spun in a kaleidoscope of fluorescent lights and concerned faces. "You think you're clever, don't you?" "Kid," Karen Williamson's voice cut through the air like a blade, her HOA security badge glinting under the harsh lighting. "Pretending to be some kind of reporter so you can get free snacks from the machine. I've been watching you for 20 minutes. And I know exactly what you're up to." Leo's hands trembled as he tried to steady himself against the vending machine, his smartphone still clutched in his right hand. The device felt impossibly heavy now, its weight magnified by the shock of what had just happened. He had been conducting interviews for his school's anti-bullying campaign, a project that had consumed his thoughts for weeks. The irony wasn't lost on him. Even in this moment of confusion and fear, I'm not trying to get snacks," Leo stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was just recording interviews for my school project. About kindness and—" "Don't lie to me." Karen's voice rose to a shriek that made several elderly residents in the nearby seating area look up from their newspapers and crossword puzzles. "You've been loitering in this hallway, blocking traffic, being a general nuisance. And look at you. You're taking up half the corridor with that bulk of yours. It's a safety hazard." The words hit Leo harder than the physical impact with the vending machine. He had heard similar comments before, whispered in school hallways and muttered by adults who thought he couldn't hear. But never with such venom, never with such public cruelty. His cheeks burned with embarrassment as he became acutely aware of the growing audience around them. Mrs. Chen, who had been one of his interview subjects just minutes earlier, stepped forward with her walker. "Excuse me, but this young man was being very polite. He asked permission before—" "Stay out of this, lady!" Karen snapped, her finger pointing accusingly at the elderly woman. "This is official HOA business. This kid is trespassing and disturbing the peace." Leo's mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. He had arrived at the community center that morning with such enthusiasm. His interview questions carefully written on index cards, his phone fully charged, and ready to capture the stories of kindness that the residents had shared. The project was supposed to be about creating a more compassionate community, about understanding the impact of bullying on young people. His teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had chosen him specifically because of his own experiences with bullying, believing that his perspective would bring authenticity to the campaign. The morning had started so well. Leo had interviewed 3 residents already, Mrs. Chen, who had shared a story about helping a young neighbor with groceries, Mr. Patterson, a retired teacher who talked about the importance of standing up for others, and young Maria Santos, whose family had recently moved to the community, and who spoke about the kindness they had received from their neighbors. Each interview had been a small revelation, a glimpse into the goodness that existed in their community. But now, as Karen loomed over him with her clipboard and her badge and her barely contained rage, Leo felt smaller than he had in months. The anti-bullying campaign suddenly felt like a cruel joke, a naive attempt to address a problem that was far more pervasive and insidious than he had imagined. "Give me that phone," Karen demanded, her hand outstretched. "You're not authorized to record on HOA property. That's a violation of our privacy policies." "But I have permission from the office," Leo protested, his voice gaining strength. "I spoke with Mrs. Campbell yesterday, and she said it was fine, as long as I got consent from the people I interviewed." Karen's face darkened. "Mrs. Campbell doesn't have the authority to grant that kind of permission. I'm the head of security here, and I'm telling you to hand over that device right now." The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Leo could feel the weight of the eyes upon him, the mixture of sympathy and fear in the faces of the residents who had gathered to watch. Some of them had been his interview subjects, people who had just finished telling him about the importance of kindness and standing up for others. Now they were watching him being humiliated and threatened, and he wondered if they would intervene or if they would simply look away. It was Mr. Patterson who broke the silence. "Young man, you don't have to give her anything. You have every right to be here." Karen whirled around to face the elderly man, her face flushed with anger. "This is none of your business. Old man, mind your own affairs before I report you for interfering with official business." "Official business." Mr. Patterson's voice was steady and calm, but Leo could hear the steel beneath it. "You're not a police officer, Karen. You're a glorified mall cop with delusions of grandeur. This boy is doing nothing wrong." The insult hit its mark. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red, and her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "How dare you speak to me like that? I have the authority to remove anyone from this property who I deem to be a disturbance or a threat." "A threat?" Mrs. Chen's voice was incredulous. "This child is a threat. He's been nothing but polite and respectful. He's working on a school project about kindness. For heaven's sake." But Karen was beyond reason now. The challenge to her authority had triggered something primal in her, a need to assert dominance that overrode any sense of proportion or decency. She turned back to Leo with renewed fury. "I said, give me that phone," she shouted, lunging forward with her hand outstretched. Leo instinctively pulled the device away from her reach, pressing it against his chest protectively. "You can't just take my phone. That's stealing." What happened next occurred so quickly that Leo barely had time to process it. Karen's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman in her 50s. She twisted his arm with a vicious yank that sent a shock of pain up to his shoulder. Leo cried out, more in surprise than pain, but the sound seemed to enrage Karen further. "Stop resisting," she screamed, though Leo was doing nothing more than trying to protect his property. "You're becoming violent. Everyone can see you're being aggressive." The accusation was so absurd that Leo almost laughed, but the pain in his wrist was real and immediate. Karen's grip tightened, and she began to pull him toward the exit. "You're leaving this property right now, young man, and you're never coming back." "Let go of me," Leo shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're hurting me." But Karen was in full authority mode now, her training as a security officer kicking in. The fact that she was manhandling a 13-year-old boy seemed to escape her entirely. "You should have thought about that before you decided to trespass and cause a disturbance. Actions have consequences, kid." Leo stumbled as Karen pulled him toward the door, his free hand windmilling for balance. His phone bounced in his grip, and he realized with horror that he was about to drop it. The device contained not just his interview footage, but also photos and videos that were precious to him. Memories of his family and friends that he couldn't afford to lose. In that moment of panic, Leo made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to struggle with Karen, he suddenly stopped resisting and let her momentum carry her forward. The unexpected change in dynamics caused Karen to stumble, and, in her confusion, her grip on his wrist loosened just enough for him to pull free. But Karen's forward momentum didn't stop. She crashed into Leo with her full weight, sending him backwards into the vending machine with a tremendous bang. The impact was so forceful that the machine rocked on its base, and several items fell from the top shelf to the bottom with a series of thuds and crashes. Leo's back hit the metal and glass with a sharp crack that echoed through the hallway. Pain shot through his spine and shoulder blades. And for a moment, he saw stars. The breath was knocked from his lungs, and he gasped like a fish out of water, desperately trying to refill his chest with air. "Look what you made me do!" Karen shouted, her voice now taking on a hysterical edge. "You attacked me. Everyone saw it. This kid attacked me." The accusation was so outrageous that several residents immediately began to protest. "That's not what happened," Mrs. Chen exclaimed. "You pushed him." "He resisted arrest," Karen shot back, though she had no authority to arrest anyone. "He was becoming violent and aggressive. I had to defend myself." Leo slumped against the vending machine, his vision still swimming from the impact. His phone had somehow remained in his hand throughout the ordeal, and he looked down at it with a mixture of relief and confusion. The screen was still lit, and he could see that the camera app was still open. In fact, a small red dot in the corner indicated that recording was still active. With growing amazement, Leo realized that his phone had been recording the entire time. Every word, every action, every moment of the confrontation had been captured on video. The camera had been rolling when Karen first approached him, when she made her accusations, when she grabbed his wrist, and when she slammed him into the vending machine. Everything was there, preserved forever in digital memory. Karen was still ranting, her voice echoing off the walls as she tried to justify her actions to the growing crowd of onlookers. "This is exactly the kind of behavior we can't tolerate in our community. Teenagers thinking they can do whatever they want, causing trouble, being disrespectful to authority figures." "You're insane," Mr. Patterson said flatly. "That boy was doing nothing wrong, and you assaulted him. I'm calling the police." "Don't you dare." Karen whirled around to face him. "I'm the one who should be calling the police. This kid attacked me. He's dangerous." Leo struggled to his feet, his back aching from the impact. He looked down at his phone again, confirming that the recording was still active. The timestamp showed that nearly 15 minutes of footage had been captured, from the beginning of Karen's initial approach to this very moment. "I have it all on video," Leo said quietly, his voice hoarse from the confrontation. The words cut through Karen's rant like a blade. She stopped mid-sentence and turned to stare at him, her eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" "I said I have it all on video," Leo repeated, his confidence growing. "My phone was recording the whole time. Everything you said, everything you did. It's all right here." Karen's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, fear, and finally, rage. "You were recording me without my permission. That's illegal. Delete that video right now." "Actually, it's not illegal to record in a public space," Mr. Patterson interjected, his voice calm and knowledgeable. "Especially when documenting a crime." "Crime." Karen's voice rose to a shriek. "What crime? I was doing my job. This kid was trespassing and being disruptive. Assault and battery of a minor." Mr. Patterson replied matter-of-factly. "False imprisonment, possibly child abuse. I'm a retired teacher, Karen. I know the law when it comes to protecting children." Leo felt a surge of gratitude toward the elderly man who had stood up for him when no one else would. He looked down at his phone again, and an idea began to form in his mind. The footage he had captured wasn't just evidence of Karen's behavior. It was also a powerful illustration of the very problem his anti-bullying campaign was trying to address. "Give me that phone," Karen demanded, making another grab for the device. But this time, Leo was ready. He stepped back and held the phone out of her reach. "No," he said firmly. "This is my property, and you have no right to take it." Karen's face contorted with rage. I'm ordering you to delete that video. You do not have permission to record me, and I demand that you remove it immediately. Too late for that now, Mrs. Chen said with a smile. The boys got you dead to rights, Karen, and frankly, it's about time someone did. The comment seemed to break something in Karen. She let out a sound that was part scream, part sob, and lunged at Leo with her arms outstretched. Delete it! Delete it now! But Leo was quicker this time. He dodged her grab and moved toward the center of the hallway, where several other residents had gathered to watch the commotion. Everyone heard what she said, he called out, his voice carrying across the space. Everyone saw what she did. She pushed me into the vending machine for no reason. We saw it, Maria Santos confirmed, her voice clear and strong. We all saw it. She attacked you because you were doing a school project. Karen looked around the crowd of faces, seeing hostility and disgust where she had expected support. You don't understand, she said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. I was just trying to maintain order. This kid was being disruptive, and I had to take action. By assaulting him. Mr. Patterson's voice was cold. By calling him names and making fun of his weight. By physically attacking a child who was doing nothing wrong. I didn't, Karen stammered, clearly realizing that her actions had been witnessed and recorded. It's not what it looks like. You don't understand the full situation. Leo held up his phone, the screen still showing the active recording. The video shows the full situation, he said quietly. From the beginning to now. Everything you said. Everything you did. Karen stared at the device as if it were a snake about to strike. You can't use that video. It's private property. And you didn't have permission to record? Actually, I did have permission, Leo said, his confidence growing. Mrs. Campbell gave me written permission yesterday to record interviews on the property. I have the email on my phone. Karen's face went pale. That doesn't cover recording security incidents. This wasn't a security incident, Mrs. Chen said firmly. This was an attack on an innocent child, and if you think we're going to let you get away with it, you're sadly mistaken. Leo looked around at the faces of the people who had gathered to watch. He saw anger, disgust, and something else, determination. These people, who had just been telling him about the importance of kindness and standing up for others, were now putting their words into action. They were standing up for him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had come here to document stories of kindness for his anti-bullying campaign. And instead, he had captured something far more powerful: actual bullying in action, and actual people standing up to stop it. I'm calling Mrs. Campbell right now, Maria Santos announced, pulling out her phone. She needs to know what her security officer is doing to children in this building. And I'm calling the police. Mr. Patterson added, what happened here is assault, plain and simple. Karen looked around wildly, clearly realizing that the situation was spiraling out of her control. You can't do this to me. I have rights. I was just doing my job. Your job is to keep the peace, not to attack children, Mrs. Chen said sternly. And you've failed at that job spectacularly. Leo felt his phone buzz with a notification. He looked down and saw that he had received a text message from his mother. How's the project going? Mijo, can't wait to see the videos tonight. The message made him smile despite everything that had happened. His mother was going to be shocked when she saw the footage he had captured, but he had a feeling she would be proud of how he had handled himself. He had stood up to a bully, just like the people he had been interviewing had talked about. He looked up from his phone to see Karen backing toward the exit. her face a mask of panic and rage. "This isn't over," she said, pointing at Leo. "You think you're clever, but you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." "Is that a threat, Mr.?" Patterson asked, his phone already at his ear. "Because I'm sure the police would be very interested in hearing about threats against a minor." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, clearly realizing that she had just made things worse for herself. Without another word, she turned and stalked toward the exit, her security badge jingling with each furious step. As soon as she was gone, the tension in the hallway seemed to evaporate. The residents who had gathered to watch began to disperse, but not before each of them approached Leo to check on him and offer their support. "Are you hurt, sweetheart, Mrs.?" Chen asked, her voice filled with motherly concern. "That was a nasty hit you took." Leo tested his shoulders and back, wincing slightly at the soreness. "I'm okay. I think just a little sore." "You should see a doctor anyway, Mr. Patterson advised. "And you should definitely show that video to your parents and your teacher. What happened here today is unacceptable." Leo nodded, still processing everything that had occurred. "I can't believe she did that. I was just trying to interview people for my school project." "Some people are just bullies," Maria Santos said sadly. "They see someone they think is vulnerable, and they attack. But you stood up to her, and that took courage." "I didn't really stand up to her," Leo protested. "I was just trying to protect my phone." "You stood your ground when she tried to take your property," Mr. Patterson corrected. "You refused to be intimidated. That's standing up to a bully." Leo felt a warm glow of pride at the words. He had never thought of himself as particularly brave. But maybe he had shown more courage than he realized. "Thank you all for helping me. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." "We couldn't just stand by and watch," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "That's not who we are. This is a community, and we look out for each other." The words struck Leo deeply. This was exactly the kind of story he had been hoping to capture for his anti-bullying campaign. But he had never expected to be at the center of it himself. The residents of the community center had shown him the true meaning of standing up for others. And their actions had been more powerful than any interview could have been. Over the next few hours, Leo found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Mrs. Campbell, the community center director, arrived within minutes of being called. She was horrified by what had happened and immediately began an investigation into Karen's actions. The police arrived shortly after, taking statements from Leo and the witnesses and viewing the video footage. Leo's parents were called, and they rushed to the community center in a state of panic and fury. His mother, Elena, was in tears when she saw the bruises already forming on his back, while his father, Miguel, was barely able to contain his rage at what had been done to his son. "I want to see the video," Elena said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I want to see exactly what that woman did to my baby." Leo hesitated, knowing that the footage would be difficult for his parents to watch. But they had a right to see it, and he knew that the video would be crucial evidence in whatever legal action might follow. He pulled up the recording on his phone and pressed play. Watching the video was a surreal experience. Leo could see himself on the screen, looking younger and more vulnerable than he had felt at the time. Karen's voice was clear and sharp, her words cutting through the audio like knives. The moment when she grabbed his wrist and twisted it was clearly visible, as was the impact when she slammed him into the vending machine. Elena gasped when she saw her son hit the machine, her hand flying to her mouth. Miguel's face darkened with anger, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "That's assault," he said grimly. That's clear. Undeniable assault on a child. Officer Martinez, the police officer who had responded to the call, nodded in agreement. Based on this video and the witness statements, we'll be filing charges against Ms. Williamson. What she did was completely unjustified and illegal. Leo felt a mix of emotions as he listened to the adults discuss the legal ramifications of what had happened. Part of him was glad that Karen would face consequences for her actions. But another part of him just wanted to forget the whole thing and move on with his life. "What about my project?" he asked suddenly. "I still need to finish my interviews for the anti-bullying campaign." His parents exchanged a look of concern. "Mijo, maybe you should take a break from the project," Elena suggested gently. "After what happened today, you need time to recover." But Leo shook his head firmly. "No, I want to finish it. What happened today just proves how important this project is. People need to see what bullying really looks like, and they need to know that there are good people who will stand up to bullies." Mr. Patterson, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. "If you're willing, I'd like to be interviewed for your project. I think what happened today is a perfect example of why we need to teach people to stand up for each other." Mrs. Chen nodded enthusiastically. "Me too. I want to be part of your campaign. What we witnessed today was unacceptable, and if sharing our stories can help prevent it from happening to other children, then I'm all for it." Leo felt his spirits lift as more and more residents volunteered to be interviewed. What had started as a simple school project was beginning to feel like something much larger and more important. The video of Karen's attack had captured something real and powerful, and he knew that it could be used to educate people about the reality of bullying. But first, he had to deal with the immediate aftermath of what had happened. The police investigation would take time, and there would likely be court proceedings to attend. Karen had been placed on administrative leave from her security position while the investigation was ongoing, but Leo knew that the real consequences were just beginning. Over the next few days, word of the incident began to spread throughout the community. Leo's parents had shared the video with his teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, who was both horrified and impressed by the footage. She immediately recognized its potential as a teaching tool and asked permission to use it as part of the school's anti-bullying program. "This is exactly the kind of real-world example that students need to see," she explained to Leo and his parents. "Too often, anti-bullying education is theoretical and abstract. This video shows bullying in action, and, more importantly, it shows people standing up to stop it." Leo was initially hesitant to share the video more widely. The experience had been traumatic, and he wasn't sure he wanted to relive it over and over again. But as he thought about it more, he realized that his reluctance was exactly the kind of thinking that allowed bullies to continue their behavior unopposed. "I want to share it," he told his parents finally, "but I want to make sure it's used in the right way. I don't want it to just be entertainment or something people watch for shock value. I want it to actually help people." His parents were proud of his maturity and his desire to turn a negative experience into something positive. They worked with Ms. Rodriguez to develop a plan for sharing the video responsibly, with appropriate context and educational materials to help viewers understand its significance. The video was first shared with Leo's school, where it became the centerpiece of a comprehensive anti-bullying presentation. Students were shown the footage and then led through discussions about what they had witnessed. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many students expressing shock at Karen's behavior and admiration for the community members who had stood up to her. "I had no idea that adults could be bullies too," one of Leo's classmates commented. "I thought bullying was just something that happened between kids." The scariest part is that she really believed she was doing the right thing. Another student observed, "She convinced herself that Leo was the problem, even when everyone could see that she was the one being awful." These discussions were exactly what Leo had hoped for when he started his anti-bullying campaign. The video had sparked meaningful conversations about power, authority, and the responsibility that everyone has to stand up for those who are being mistreated. Word of the video continued to spread beyond the school. Ms. Rodriguez shared it with other educators in the district, who were equally impressed by its educational value. Soon, it was being used in schools throughout the region as a training tool for both students and teachers. The legal case against Karen moved forward as well. The district attorney's office reviewed the video and witness statements and decided to file formal charges of assault and battery against her. The case was straightforward, with the video providing clear evidence of her actions and the witness testimony supporting Leo's version of events. Karen hired a lawyer and attempted to mount a defense based on her claim that she was just doing her job. But the video made it clear that her actions were completely unjustified, and her lawyer eventually advised her to accept a plea deal rather than risk a trial. The plea agreement required Karen to plead guilty to assault and battery, pay a fine, and complete anger management counseling. She was also permanently banned from working in any security capacity and was required to stay away from Leo and his family. The HOA immediately terminated her employment and issued a public apology for her actions. But the most significant consequence came when the video was discovered by a national anti-bullying organization. The organization's director, Dr. Sarah Chen, reached out to Leo and his family to ask permission to use the video as part of a national awareness campaign. This footage is incredibly powerful because it shows bullying in its most naked form. Dr. Chen explained during a phone call with Leo and his parents, "Too often, bullies are able to hide behind claims that they were just joking or that the victim was overreacting. This video shows the reality of what bullying looks like, and it shows how communities can come together to stop it." Leo was initially overwhelmed by the idea of his experience becoming part of a national campaign. He had never sought fame or attention, and the thought of millions of people seeing his moment of vulnerability was intimidating. But as he thought about all the other kids who might be facing similar situations, he knew he had to say yes. If sharing my story can help even one other kid stand up to a bully, then it's worth it. He told Dr. Chen, "I just want to make sure that people understand what really happened and why it's important." The national campaign was launched 6 months after the original incident. The video was featured as part of a comprehensive anti-bullying toolkit that included discussion guides, educational materials, and resources for victims of bullying. Leo was invited to speak at the launch event, where he shared his story with an audience of educators, policymakers, and anti-bullying advocates. "I never expected to become the subject of my own anti-bullying campaign," he said during his speech. "But I learned that bullying can happen anywhere, to anyone, and from anyone. The important thing is that we don't let it go unchallenged." The people at the community center that day showed me what it means to stand up for others, and I hope that my story can inspire others to do the same. The response to the campaign was overwhelming. The video was viewed millions of times online, and it sparked countless discussions about bullying, authority, and community responsibility. Schools across the country began using it as a teaching tool, and it became a standard part of many anti-bullying curricula. Perhaps most importantly, the video inspired other victims of bullying to come forward with their own stories. Leo received hundreds of messages from people who had experienced similar situations and who found strength in his example. Many of them shared their own videos and stories, creating a growing movement of people who refuse to accept bullying as normal or acceptable. One message that particularly moved Leo came from a young girl named Sarah in Texas, She wrote, "I saw your video, and it gave me the courage to tell my parents about what was happening to me at school." The principal there is just like that security guard. She always takes the side of the bullies and makes me feel like everything is my fault. But seeing how you stood up for yourself and how those adults stood up for you made me realize that I deserve better. Thank you for sharing your story. Stories like Sarah's reminded Leo why he had agreed to share his experience in the first place. The video had become more than just documentation of an assault. It had become a symbol of resistance against bullying in all its forms. As the first anniversary of the incident approached, Leo was invited back to the Riverside Community Center for a special event. The community center had undergone significant changes in the wake of the incident, implementing new policies and procedures to ensure that nothing like what had happened to Leo would ever happen again. Mrs. Campbell, the director, had used the incident as an opportunity to completely overhaul the center's approach to security and community relations. She had hired new staff, provided extensive training on working with young people, and established clear protocols for handling disputes and conflicts. What happened to Leo was a wake-up call for all of us. She said during the anniversary event, "We realized that we had allowed a culture of authoritarianism to develop in our community space, and that was completely unacceptable. This center is supposed to be a place where everyone feels welcome and safe, regardless of their age, size, or background." The event was attended by many of the people who had witnessed the original incident, including Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Chen, and Maria Santos. They had all become advocates for anti-bullying efforts in their own right, using their experience to educate others about the importance of standing up for those who are being mistreated. Leo taught us that anyone can be a target of bullying, and anyone can be a hero. Mr. Patterson said during his remarks, "What we did that day wasn't extraordinary. It was just basic human decency. But in a world where too many people look the other way, basic human decency can feel revolutionary." Leo was invited to speak at the event, and he reflected on how much his life had changed since that day. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also been transformative. He had discovered a strength he didn't know he possessed, and he had learned the true power of community and solidarity. "A year ago, I came here to interview people about kindness for a school project," he said. "I never imagined that I would become the subject of my own project, or that my experience would be shared with millions of people around the world. But I'm grateful for what happened, because it taught me that we all have the power to stand up to bullying, and we all have the responsibility to protect those who can't protect themselves." He paused and looked around the room at the faces of the people who had become his friends and allies. "The video of what happened to me has been seen by millions of people, but the real impact has been in the conversations it has started and the actions it has inspired. Every time someone stands up to a bully, every time someone refuses to look the other way when someone is being mistreated, that's when real change happens." As the event concluded, Leo felt a sense of closure that he hadn't expected. The trauma of what had happened would always be with him, but it no longer defined him. Instead, it had become a source of strength and purpose, driving him to continue his work as an advocate for those who face bullying and discrimination. The video that had captured his assault had become a powerful tool for education and change. But more importantly, it had shown him the true meaning of community and solidarity. The people who had stood up for him that day had shown him that he was not alone, and that there are always people willing to fight for what is right. As he walked out of the community center that day, Leo thought about all the other young people who might be facing similar situations. He hoped that his story would give them the courage to stand up for themselves and to seek help when they needed it. He hoped that it would inspire others to be the kind of person who stands up for those who are being mistreated, just as Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Chen, and the others had stood up for him. The vending machine was still there in the hallway, but it had been moved to a different location and was now surrounded by colorful posters promoting kindness and respect. Leo smiled as he walked past it, remembering the moment when his life had changed forever. What had started as a simple school project had become something much larger and more important, and he was proud to have been a part of it. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities and opportunities to make a difference. He knew that there would be more bullies to face and more battles to fight, but he also knew that he wouldn't be fighting them alone. The community that had formed around his story would continue to grow and spread, creating a network of people committed to standing up for what is right. And somewhere, in a school or community center or online forum, another young person would see his video and find the courage to stand up to their own bully. That thought filled Leo with a sense of purpose and hope that would carry him forward for years to come. The metallic crash of the vending machine that had started it all had long since faded into memory, but its echoes continued to reverberate around the world, inspiring countless others to stand up, speak out, and refuse to accept bullying as normal or acceptable. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all.